Good morning. I'm Scott Harvey.
Good morning. Good morning, Scott.
I'm a white man in his 60s, and my pronouns are he and him. I want to welcome you to First Unitarian Church, where our mission is to explore the eternal, to nurture community, and to pursue the common good. We welcome you in your brokenness and in your wholeness, no matter who you have been, who you are, or who you are becoming. We greet you today with love. I'd like to extend a special welcome to everyone who is watching us on YouTube. During the prelude, please introduce yourself in the comments and let us know where you're joining us from. If you're in Oklahoma City, for instance, what neighborhood are you in? Or if you're elsewhere, what city are you in? And now the prelude prepares us for worship. We light our chalice in Midtown Oklahoma City, on land that was home to first Americans, including the Apache, the Caddo, and Wichita, on land that was taken from the Muskogee and Seminole and other removed and relocated peoples. We light the chalice as a symbol of our sacred time together. The burning chalice represents the light of reason and science, the warmth of loving community, and the cleansing heat of justice, and the flame of hope.
Again, welcome, everyone. I am Reverend Diana Davies, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And for those in our community who are blind or visually impaired or listening to us today, I am a white woman in my 50s wearing a clerical robe and stole. I am very pleased to introduce our guest minister today, Reverend Chris Rothbauer. Reverend Chris is a minister and a spiritual companion who currently serves as minister of Auburn Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Auburn, Alabama. In addition to their work as a minister and soul companion, Chris is an emotional CPR educator and is training to be a dream work counselor in the Jungian tradition. They are also a registered pet chaplain, a member of the Covenant of UU Pagans, and Trust, which is the Transgender Religious Professional Unitarian Universalists Together, and a nominee for the board of the UU Mental Health Network. Our opening words were written by Reverend Luke Stevens Royer. It's called Prayer Ballot. I walk in as on pilgrimage. The altar cloths are red, white, and blue. The ushers are the women who have been running these things, who have been running everything since before I was born. I'm handed the ballot like a scroll because the questions seem that important, ancient and modern, of what my God and country ask of me. Who? Who? For commissioner, mayor, president. Who? For District 8, Ward 7, school board. Who will do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly? I make my mark with at least a shred of hope that something good will come from this. And regardless, I remember, the world won't be destroyed entirely by this. The world won't be saved entirely by this. Marking my vote is like kneeling in prayer, because neither will accomplish anything right away. But the purpose of both is to remind me of my deepest hope for the world that I'm trying to help create. So I rise from prayer and I turn in my ballot and remember the who is me and us and we the people. And again, I set to the task that is mine: justice, mercy, humble service in my small corner of the world. Our choral hymn this morning is number 108 in the gray hymnal, My Life Flows On, an Endless Song.
Good morning. I'm Larry Little, a short man with gray hair. My pronouns are he, him, his. Every Sunday we take an offering. Since 2002, all the cash and designated checks from that offering have gone directly to external nonprofit organizations doing good work, our Change for Change partners. For the month of November, our Change for Change partner is Voice. Voice is organized in civic engagement. Voice is a coalition of congregations, worker associations, schools, and nonprofit groups that have come together out of a deep sense of mission and concern for the pressures faced by families in the Oklahoma City metropolitan area. Voice works to better understand those pressures by asking members of our community about their own experiences. Members strive to foster real conversations instead of ideological shouting matches. First Unitarian is a founding member and one of the most active organizations within Voice. Funds raised through Change for Change will go directly toward the annual membership fees for First Unitarian Church. For those of you who are here in the sanctuary with us today, in just a moment we'll be passing the offering plate. If you're not able to make a gift today, we invite you to write a note of encouragement to our Change for Change partner organization, and we'll share those messages with them as well. And if you're watching us online, please make your gift by sending a check to First Unitarian. Just write Change for Change on the memo line, or make an online payment through our website, 1UC.org.
Tulsa was a great place to grow up. I attended Robert E. Lee Elementary School, and I'm pleased to say they changed the name to Council Oak Elementary School. There were railroad tracks in the back, and we'd sneak out a hole in the fence and put pennies on the railroad tracks, silly stuff like that. One time, my mom bought treats for me to encourage me to attend my piano lesson. Of course, that's the day I put my little 10-year-old foot down and said, "No way." Too much anxiety. Then there was art class, something I didn't really get. What was I supposed to do? Again, too much anxiety. It was hard for me to engage in things that I didn't understand, and to this day, I sometimes get lost at the very beginning trying to understand how to do something. So I'd horse around, and I'd end up in the boys' cloakroom, which is a phrase I don't know if they use anymore, as punishment, which was a bummer until I noticed I could climb out of the window into a strange and mysterious room full of pottery and equipment and windows to the playground where I really wanted to be. Again, a minor kid infraction. There were others, the occasional SWAT in junior high for releasing the basketball a split second after the whistle, or being 1 minute late to return to shop class after recess, things like that. And those little episodes would follow me through life, accompanied by my life companion, anxiety. I've always had difficulty concentrating. I can read, for instance, but I'm not a strong reader. I think it's because if the first few pages ignite my imagination, then I'm off to the land of daydreams. This trait of mine has led to some anxiety in my life, so I'm amazed at how productive I used to be. I'm retired now. And I think the main reason was that I didn't have time to reflect upon the many tasks of everyday life. And it's kind of funny, I've had to function as an organized person and an extroverted person. I can do those things, and I take pride when I'm involved in solving a complex problem, but the process often evokes a significant amount of anxiety. I've used different strategies to cope. For instance, I've sought solace in songs. I'd listen to tons of music and uncover meaning and imagine meaning that probably wasn't there. During the pandemic, I've listened to thousands of songs. And one of the songs I've listened to a lot lately is called Hopeful and Hopeless by Reb Fountain is her name. In it, she proclaims, "All you guys better open your eyes and get us out of this goddamn mess and fight for the hopeful and the hopeless." I want you to take care of your mental health as well as your physical health. That's something that I've been trying to do for about the past year or so. And if you do suffer, know that you're not alone and that others derive great meaning from life, even while suffering. And cut people some slack. They may be searching for ways to cope and haven't found a way. There is hope in that search. After all, I took up piano again last year after 54 years. And I've noticed that I seem to prefer experiential things like concerts and sporting events and theater, things that don't require anything of me. They give me great joy. And sometimes it's almost a calling. Reb Fountain's song suggests that I am one of those guys that needs to get us out of this mess. As are you, as is everyone. So how to continue the struggle when it seems hopeless? Well, over the years, I've used a lot of coping techniques to lessen the effects of anxiety, but recently, I've accelerated my efforts to strengthen all aspects of my being. Exercise to resolve physical weaknesses, steps to strengthen my mental health, and musical exploration as a means to grow spiritually. While these are coping techniques, they also build hope. So yes, I can cope, and there is hope because of that.
Would you please join me in a spirit of prayer or meditation? Spirit of life, source of love, we gather on this Sunday before the midterm elections with many feelings, many deep human emotions. Some of us today are happy. There's someone here today who is filled with joy. Maybe it's pride in their own accomplishments or the accomplishments of a child or a sports team. Someone here is looking forward to a trip that's been long overdue. Can't wait for it to start. Someone here is angry. They've been watching all of the advertisements on TV, listening to all of the lies, and they're pretty sure that if confronted with a fascist, they could pretty easily punch them in the face with joy. Someone here has a spouse who's in the hospital, and they're worried. Someone here is getting ready to celebrate the holidays for the first time without their sweetheart by their side. Someone here is missing a loved one who's maybe been away for a long time, but for whatever reason now their presence or their absence is hurting like never before. Someone here is scared. They're afraid of what might happen after this election. They're afraid of people rising into positions of power who have made it very clear that they do not believe that certain people have a right to exist, including folks who are right here with us today. The belief that they don't have the right to exist because of who they are. Spirit of life, source of love. There is an old, old song that we now know as Kumbaya, but comes to us from the Gullah people of the Sea Islands off of South Carolina and Georgia, descendants of the enslaved people from West Africa. They were singing, "Come by here. Oh God, come by here." Somebody's crying, "Come by here." Somebody's worried, "Come by here." Somebody's singing, "Come by here." Come by here and bring us peace. Bring us liberation. Bring us love. Spirit of life, source of love, come by here. Be with us in love today. May it be so. Amen.
Good morning. I'd like first to thank you all for having me here this morning and for Reverend Diana for inviting me to be here. It's a pretty dark Sunday that I preached to you this morning, and I admit to that. But I think back, and what comes to mind for me was June of 2019. I was going through a pretty good point in my life. I had just completed a chaplain's residency. 2 months earlier, I had been called as the second settled minister in Auburn, Alabama. I was with my partner and we were building a life together, and it seemed pretty amazing, just us and our fur pets. And I was pretty optimistic about what the future would bring, with good reason. COVID wasn't even on my radar. That June, as we were preparing to move from our apartment in New Albany in southern Indiana down to Alabama for me to start my ministry, General Assembly happened in Spokane, Washington. Now, I didn't go that year because General Assembly is very expensive without an expense account, and that's a topic for another day. But it's interesting when you have so many UUs on your Facebook feed, it almost can feel like you are there even though you're not. And so I was hearing everything that was happening. My understanding, it was a generally good and productive GA. But one thing that happened that year that is still reverberating is that one of my colleagues chose to distribute a book, a self-published book that was quickly denounced as racist, transphobic, poorly researched. He didn't even bother to talk to the people he was talking about. I found myself in an interesting situation with that, because here I was getting ready to come into a new settled ministry in Auburn, Alabama. But here in this book that my colleague wrote, without talking to me or anyone else involved, was a situation I was directly involved in. And of course, the details were all wrong. It was written without any grace, with the worst possible thing in mind that we could have had. And so I wrote an article, self-published it on Medium to correct the record a little bit. It was risky. I could have gotten down to Auburn and found out they read my article and they thought it was crap and I needed to go now. We didn't have a relationship yet, after all. But what bloomed out of that article was more articles, both from me and from other people directly involved in the events. Unfortunately, what also came out of that is that it enabled some of the most toxic elements of our Unitarian Universalist Association. Anyone who had an axe to grind with the UUA, it seemed like, was stepping up to defend this guy. And it was frustrating. And there is now another self-published book on Amazon that contains an entire chapter mostly about me. No, I wasn't asked for my opinion. That's been going on for nearly 4 years now. And I must confess, it's been exhausting, especially as I also navigate the pandemic with my congregation. And this past summer at General Assembly, I found myself, as some of the people there were getting more and more aggressive, even going so far as to stop children and try to tell them about how their parents were wrong. I found myself exhausted and angry and wondering why I ever took this on. After all, it's a distraction. The world is on fire, and I have used so much of my limited capacity to respond to this guy. I thought, what was even the point? Should I back off and hope that he goes away? This past week, I've been traveling a lot. And so I'm sure a lot happened and I'm not aware of it. But I did find out that this particular minister was on a podcast. This isn't a first. He's been on podcasts before, including far-right figures who want to use him to disprove the left. But what was different about this podcast host is he actually did his homework. He read my articles and the articles by the other folks who had written responses. He cornered my colleague and got him to admit that not only did he have the facts of several situations very wrong, but that he didn't bother talking to anyone before he wrote his book. I couldn't help but think of that when I knew I was going to be preaching here this morning. Because what I was doing, I wish I didn't have to do. And yet, who else was going to do it if I didn't? I didn't immediately change things, and that podcast will not immediately change things. But what each of us is doing is creating more action possible in the future, that we might be able to possibly not have to go in and waste so much time of our precious, limited time in putting out brush fires when the whole damn world is on fire. Indeed, for me, this is the basis of moral and political action. We don't go in, or at least I don't, in order to create a particular world. That, of course, is a nice byproduct often. But I go in because I love the world. My former seminary professor, the UU theologian Sharon D. Welch, once put it this way: the ground of challenging exploitation, injustice, and oppression is not a vision of how the world could be or would be in the future reign of God or after the revolution. The ground of challenging injustice is gratitude, the heartfelt desire to honor the wonder of that which is, to cherish, to celebrate, to delight in the many gifts and joys of life. I challenged this book because I love our Unitarian Universalist Association. I don't believe it's perfect. In fact, some of my other articles are quite critical of it at times. And yet, there is possibility within our movement that is yet unrealized. People need to hear the saving and affirming message that they are okay just as they are. that there is inherent worth and dignity. It once saved me, and it saved so many people who I've come across. I know Reverend Diana has alluded to it in her prayer this morning and in the opening words. But I'm sure there's a lot of anxiety in this room right now about what will happen on Tuesday. I hope you didn't come looking for me to tell you because I didn't pass my psychic class. I don't know what we're going to wake up to on Wednesday morning. What I do know is that mental health right now is at an all-time low, both from the political polarization that we're seeing all around the world, as well as residual effects of the pandemic. There's a lot of reason to wonder, are we going to hand our children and grandchildren a better world? There's anxiety about climate change, about racism. As a queer and trans person, I feel it deeply with some of the worst transphobia I've seen in my generation. Reproductive justice is at severe risk right now. And I'm aware that I serve in a state where it may soon be possible that people have to travel 12 hours to get reproductive health care. And there are threats to the very fabric of our democracy. I want, before I go any further, to affirm those fears. They are real. And as American author Gabrielle Bernstein once said, fear is often our immediate response to uncertainty. There's nothing wrong with experiencing fear. The key is to not get stuck in it. We need to find ways to push ourselves towards moral action, and we need to do so not because we have certainty that on Wednesday morning we will have the response that we want, but because it's the right thing to do. Sharon Welch continues that we must build an ethic of risk, which she says involves taking responsible action within the limits of bounded power and name the resources and invoke persistent defiance in the face of repeated defeats. I love that phrase, persistent defiance. It is easier, she says, to give up on long-term social change when one is comfortable with the present. But when things aren't looking so good, it can also feel pretty down. But this is the thing. Just like the articles that I wrote about our denominational conflict, our action, we don't always see results right away. In fact, it can sometimes take decades, because human systems have a tendency to move really, really slow. But this is what I believe. Our actions create the possibility of more actions in the future. They create the possibility that even if we don't live to see the results, someone else might. I'm reminded of a woman by the name of Anna Howard Shaw. She was a suffragist, fought for most of her adult life for the right for women to be able to vote. She died in the year 1919, the year before the constitutional amendment that would have granted her the right to vote was finally ratified. She never saw the results of her own action. And yet I suspect if we asked her, she wouldn't have regretted any of it. Because even though she never got to cast a vote, how many women have been able to cast votes because of her work? Martin Luther King Jr. goes even further than this and reminds us that the work is never done. Indeed, Anna Howard Shaw and the rest of the first wave feminists paved the way for the second and third wave feminism that is continuing to this day. Indeed, King said, "I've seen the promised land. I might not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land." And he delivered that speech less than 24 hours before he was assassinated. He didn't ask for that. In fact, he said later in the speech, "I'd love to have some longevity." But this is what I'm convinced of, that even when results don't come right away, our actions right here, right now, matter. Because Martin Luther King wasn't created in a vacuum either. If it hadn't been for Howard Thurman and Henry David Thoreau and Mahatma Gandhi, we might not have ever had the king that we did. And yet, actions of these different people and more together, who likely never met, came together to create the possibility that was King's vision for a more equitable society. There's a quote that's often attributed to King, but was actually written by Unitarian Theodore Parker. It says, "The arc of the universe is long and it bends towards justice." UUs love to quote this, especially when they find out it was one of ours that King lifted it from. But they don't like to emphasize that long part. Parker was quoting it about slavery and abolition because he was saying it at a time when it seemed like there was little being done, little progress being made. The part of the quote that often gets left out is this. He said, "Things refuse to be mismanaged long." Jefferson trembled when he thought of slavery and remembered that God is just. Ere long, all America will tremble. And granted, we now know more about Jefferson than Parker probably did, so there's probably some reason to be a little skeptical of that part. And yet, think about that. Things refuse to be mismanaged for long. We will come back around to justice, even when it doesn't feel like it, if we are all willing. If we are willing. One of my colleagues of color reminded me not long ago that pushbacks and setbacks indicate that we are making progress. If there wasn't a substantial challenge to the system, there would be no need for this pushback. The road may be difficult, but we will get there, my friends. We will get there, no matter what happens on Tuesday. No matter who wins on Tuesday, I'm going to wake up on Wednesday and keep doing what I've been doing all along. And that is to be an advocate for justice and a minister of peace. How will your actions reverberate into the future? Who will you enable with the way that you live your life on Tuesday and Wednesday? Now, I don't want anyone to leave today mistaken that what I'm telling you to do is quit your job, get rid of your family, friends be damned, go out and... No. The world's always going to be on fire, and each of us has a little capacity. But here's what you can do. You have to take care of yourself. As Scott's reflection suggested, mental health care and self-care is critical if we're going to restore hope and if we're going to be a hope to those who need it. There is always something more you could be doing, but you are no good to anyone if you burn out. We need communities of joy that remind us to love the world. Indeed, one of the many shoes that I fill is as a movement chaplain, a minister who goes into social justice communities to listen when things go bad, to celebrate when things go well, and to remind people that in the midst of our organizing, we can find a deep joy that allows us to keep going. I suspect for many of you, that's this congregation. Others may have other systems in addition. But whatever it is, find a way to create that joy, to push yourself towards a world that could be. The Buddha once said that in the confrontation between the stream and the rock, the stream always wins. Not through strength, but through persistence. In the days ahead, it's possible you might need to talk to somebody. Please do that. But remember, even as you feel that fear, and feel that fear, even as you feel joy and feel that joy, your actions, what you do, we need them, every one of them, no matter how small or how big. We need your gifts. The world needs your gift. This is something that is often understood by the right, that we need to be able to play the long game. After all, they played the long game for so long with Roe versus Wade. I'm willing to play it even longer. And I hope you'll join me. Be the stream. push on, even when the rock seems to block the way. Because that rock will eventually give way, even if we never see it. And may we never give up on the world as it could be. May it be so.
Our congregational hymn is one that is very personal to me and resonates because we are, for those of you who were here when I started, I told my life's tale as a tale of perseverance, a tale of love, a tale of hope, a tale of peace, and a tale of joy. And as we, in the spirit of love, hope, peace, and joy, sing together, let us look forward to a better world of perseverance. Let us please open our hymnals to hymn 95. There is more love somewhere.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of love and community, which burns on in our hearts.
My friends, my benediction to you is this. May we join in the words of Martin Luther that if the world should burn down tomorrow, I will still plant my apple tree. Amen Blessed be, and go in peace.